he was gone another 2 years. Joab conspired with Absalom to get him back. He hired an actor, a lady, to come and tell a story to David. David believed the story. It convinced him to invite Absalom back to Israel, but not back to the king's palace. Absalom burns Joab's fields to get his attention. Joab appeals to David to bring Absalom back into the fold. David kisses Absalom, which is the reverse of what normally happens, and welcomes him back. And it seems like a moment later, Absalom plots to take over David's kingdom. David flees Jerusalem to the forest on the other side of the Jordan River. However, David's in his element. Facing superior forces, God's will is with David. Absalom is hopelessly trapped. He was riding on a mule in the forest, and his huge head of hair was caught in a tree, but the mule kept going, leaving him helplessly hanging there. And despite David's specific instructions, Joab kills Absalom, then ends the rebellion, at least that part of the rebellion. So that is the background, which is a lot. There's a lot we didn't cover there. Also, good news, we don't have 130 verses to cover today. We only have 91, so it's a lot less. It's only 3 chapters. So if we could, in our books, it's on page 60, which is David's Kingdom Restored. If someone would read the Seeking the Context, that is page 60 and maybe about a quarter of page 61. Thank you, Sister Doris. It's really good of the writer of the quarterly to challenge us to pray for the leaders of our country. You can spend 5 minutes watching the news and ask yourself why are our leaders doing what they're doing, and there may be little that's within our control to be able to do, but we can pray. We can pray for them. We can pray for them that they would follow the Lord's commandments, that they would be convicted where they're not following the Lord's commandments, and it makes a difference. And so that's what the writer is telling us here. And it is hard to lead a nation. David had a good round of running the country when he unified the country at the beginning, and he was doing everything right. He brought Israel and Judah together, and as a unified country, they had a lot of success. But that success didn't last long. Once David led the way by being wicked, then pretty much everybody else joined right in. So let's go ahead and jump into the first part of our lesson today, which is 2 Samuel 19. If we could read verses 1 through 9, we'll get started. Thank you, Sister Jordan. So this is a complete mess. It really is. It's a complete mess. So David fled Jerusalem, crossed the Jordan. They were managed to vanquish Absalom. And now, rather than do what you normally do after you're victorious, David is mourning the loss of his son, and the rest of the country is wondering what's going on. Because remember, there were a lot of people that were following Absalom. And so they don't even know what to do next. So there's huge confusion, and it reminds us that David was a very skilled and a fantastic warrior, but not such a good ruler. And he really didn't understand how to do it as well as maybe others did. And so he makes a lot of mistakes. In this case, he's grieving for his son, but his son was indeed a traitor to the country. And Joab, who's definitely no role model to follow in a lot of things that he does, in this particular case, my belief is because he is quoted here in the Bible, the Lord wants us to see this. He wants to see us to see that Joab is counseling him, telling him, if you don't get your head straight, you're going to lose the whole country again. You just had the victory in battle, and this is the time to get organized and to get everything pulled together and get all the people pulled together. Yeah, you're over here mourning your son that was really a traitor to the country. So he's trying to shake him out of the whole thing, the whole situation. And so you see in verse 8 that the king arose and sat in the gate. So that part is a little bit confusing because they're not all the way back to Jerusalem yet. When you say in the gate, that's the place where people are waiting to greet the king. So wherever the king is, there's going to be a gate of people that are going to be waiting to approach the king. So if the king is here or wherever he is, there's going to be some procession of people that want to have a meeting with him, and we'll see a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then in verse 9, and all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king saved us out of the hands of our enemies, and he delivered us out of the hands of the Philistines, and now he has fled out of the land for Absalom. So they're saying here he is, like the most victorious warrior that we've ever seen in the history of Israel, and he fled the country because of his son. And so he's got strife inside of his family he can't even handle. And so they're absolutely confused. In verse 9, it was once completely unified under David, as David followed God, is completely in strife, wondering, what are we going to do now? In verse 10, and Absalom, whom we anointed over us, and this is Israel, for Israel is dead in battle. Now therefore, why speak ye not a word of bringing the king back? And so when David won the battle, then the very next thing should have been to install David back as the king. There should have been a process for doing that of the people that were remaining the leaders showing their loyalty to David, and then installing him back as the king. So here in verse 11, let's see, I think. Sorry. Okay. So if somebody would like to read 2 Samuel 19, 10 through 39, so that's a pretty long read. Thanks, Brother Mike. You need a glass of water after after reading all that. There's a lot. There's a lot going on there, and so we see that And so now, what's happening with all the verses we just read? Mm-hmm. 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 After Saul died, Solomon. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on. So Shammai obviously did the wrong thing, and he's concerned about his future. He's concerned about what's going to happen next. Am I going to be killed? And once again, Abishai is loyal. He says, "Yeah, by law, you should be killed for your lack of loyalty." So Shammai's putting himself on the mercy of David, and David says, "Okay, yeah, never mind. You're fine. You're not going to be harmed. We also see Mephibosheth, so there's confusion because Ziba lied. And you can tell David didn't do the right thing in the first place when he listened to Ziba and his whole story. So Ziba brought all these gifts and everything and supplies which were needed and basically got his way with David, which is what he really wanted, because he did it at exactly the right timing, right? So he gave him the supplies exactly when he needed them, and implied or said that Mephibosheth was following Absalom, which was incorrect. And so he gave him all the land that he had previously given to Mephibosheth without doing any research, homework, anything, which is kind of common with David. We see this over and over again, where he doesn't pray to the Lord and he doesn't counsel his advisors, anybody. He just makes decisions. And in this case, it's not the best decision again. So a bad decision leads to another bad decision, and so on. We see there's a chain reaction sort of a thing. And so Mephibosheth says, don't worry about it. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. He can have everything. And then Barzillai, who was also one of the ones that supported David, was invited to come and stay with David, more or less in the palace. And he said, yeah, I'm too old for that. I'm ready to relax and take it easy, and I've got a spot that I'd rather go to that's a lot more relaxing than the palace, but I'll send my son, and he can be there, and he can participate in all that. So what they did is they showed respect to the king and recognized him as the king, once again, the king of Israel. And so this was really important. So it was important who was acknowledging David as the king, but not everybody was acknowledging him as the king, as we see. So there's going to be some problems coming up. So here in verse 40, 19 and 40, this is where he's dealing with Judah. So would somebody like to read 2 Samuel 19, 40 through 43? Thank you, Sister Cheryl. So what we see here is Judah listens to what the priest had said. They decide to get on board, but instead of waiting to do it as a unified country, they were basically the ones farthest away. They jumped clearly over the other 10 tribes and said, okay, now we're going to escort the king back, which wasn't the appropriate protocol. It should have been all of the tribes, not just Judah. And so the other tribes are saying, what are you doing? We're supposed to do this together. And David doesn't say anything. Here's once again where silence is bad. If you're a ruler or you're in charge of anything and you don't do what you're supposed to do, it's bad. And so you can make mistakes of commission and mistakes of omission. And we see in these verses, David's making a lot of mistakes of omission. And this is one of the mistakes that he made, is not insisting that Judah follow the right protocol to unite all the tribes together so they can all escort him back. Okay, so that got us through 43. So now you see that the country is basically split between Israel and Judah, and maybe even more than that, but that's at the least, the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes. And so we're going to see next what happens as a result of some of this strife. So we're going to read, if someone could read 2 Samuel 20, 1 through 7. Okay, so what's happening here? Thanks, brother. Mm-hmm. 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 Abishai, which is Joab's brother. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this is a mess. This is really a big mess. And so you just saw that the 10 tribes of Israel were not happy because of the way the king was conveyed back, that Judah did it themselves. And so Sheba was seizing the moment of all this unrest and people being unhappy and say, Israel, join up with me and we're gonna revolt against David. And so he just fought off Absalom and that whole rebellion. And now here is Sheba uh, spawning even another rebellion. And so this is a big mess. This is a big mess that just it's like a when you see a big boulder on top of a hill and you see it move a little bit and it moves a little bit more, you know what's going to happen. That boulder is going to come flying down that hill and it's going to crash and destroy everything if you don't get out of its way, if you can. That's exactly the kind of thing that's happening here. So David doesn't handle it necessarily the right way. He he tells Amasa. So who was Amasa? Right. Yeah, he was the military leader for Absalom. So now he's become the military leader for David. So what happened to Joab? Joab got demoted. He was like yeah, he was rebellious, so he got demoted. And so we read later here that David went to Abishai, which was Joab's brother. So it wasn't even that Joab was second in command. Joab was somewhere down on the list. He was more or less in timeout, if you want to say it another way. I'm not sure David knew what he was going to do with him, but he didn't deal with Joab. He just kind of put that to the side and decided to move forward. And so here's Amasa being told, assemble the men of Judah within 3 days and be here present. Well, Amasa wasn't able to do it. Why wasn't he able to do it? Maybe he was a weak leader. Maybe Abishai and Joab said, don't you dare even think about doing that, or we're going to come after you. We don't know what was going on. There's a lot of drama in here that's not completely spelled out. But you can tell this is not a unified country. There's a lot of strife, as we read earlier. And this strife is every person in strife. This is not a few people in strife. This is the whole country in strife. So Amasa takes too long. So David goes to Abishai and says, okay, now you take care of this. So Abishai does his thing, goes after Sheba. And then in verse 8, when they were in the great stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa went before them, and Joab's garment that he had put on was girded unto him, and upon his girdle with a sword fastened upon his loins and the sheath thereof. And as he went forth, it fell out. And in verse 9, and Joab said to Amasa, art thou in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with the right hand to kiss him. But Amasa took no heed to the sword that was in Joab's hand. So he smote him therewith in the 5th rib, and shed out his bowels to the ground, and struck him not again, and he died. So Joab and Abishai his brother pursued after Sheba the son of Bichri. So this is even more of a mess. So now Joab is acting like the sword accidentally fell out of its scabbard so he could get his hand on it when he was right beside Amasa, and he just basically just cuts his stomach open until all of his intestines and everything are hanging out, and he just lets him basically bleed out. I mean, so this is a horrible way to kill somebody, and so Joab does this in a very public way in front of everyone. And you can imagine everyone's trying to figure out what to do, because Amasa was the king's appointed. Just like David had told everyone not to harm Absalom, Joab did anyway. In this case, he made Amasa the military leader. Joab killed him. So Joab is pretty much doing whatever he wants to do. And so it makes you wonder that all of this, the root of all this could have been way back when David more or less told Joab to see that Uriah was killed. And so Joab was smart enough to know what was going on way back then. Right. He was involved in bringing him back because he wanted him to be the next leader. He was expecting him to be the next leader for sure. And so, yeah. So there a lot of things going on. With Joab, Joab does some things right. There's a lot of things not the right way as well. Amasa wallowed in his blood in the midst of the highway, and when the man saw that all the people stood still, he removed Amasa out of the highway into the field. He cast a cloth upon him when he saw everyone that came by stood still. When he was removed out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue after Sheba. So Joab made it very obvious that Amasa was dead. Once he was dead, he got him out of the way, and they went on after Sheba. Let's see, would somebody like to read verses, 14 to 22? Thank you, Sister Joanne. So Joab is the most experienced military commander. He's going after Sheba, and he's hiding in a city. It's not his people. This is a northern tribe. It's probably one of the farthest northern tribes. He's hiding in the city, and Joab's ready to tear the place apart. He's ready to destroy the city. And this woman reminds Joab that there's a certain way these matters should be handled. And actually, she's referring back to Deuteronomy 20, verses 10 through 13. When thou comest nigh unto a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace unto it. And it shall be, if it make thee answer of peace, and open unto thee, then it shall be, that all the people that is found therein shall be tributaries unto thee, and they shall serve thee. And if it will make no peace with thee, but will make war against thee, then thou shalt besiege it. And when the Lord thy God hath delivered it into thine hands, thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword. But the women and the little ones and the cattle and all that's in the city, even all the spoil thereof, shalt thou take unto thyself, and thou shalt eat the spoil of thine enemies, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. So she was reminding him, don't just automatically come and kill all of us. All of us are not rebelling against David. And so she offers up the head of Sheba, and Joab listens. He pays attention to what she's saying. He actually stops besieging the city and listens to her and agrees to her terms. And so she's representing the city, and then they kill Sheba and deliver his head. So that ends this part of all the stuff that's going on. So mhm, mhm. Yep, most definitely. So he's blind with his vengeance, and he's seeking to destroy the city. And she's smart enough to get his attention and remind him what he's supposed to be doing in this situation. So they save the city, and then in verse 23, now Joab was over all the host of Israel, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and over the Pelethites, and Adoram was over the tribute. Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was recorder, and Sheva was scribe, and Abiathar. You remember those two priests? Those were the ones that were carrying the ark and had that responsibility. And Ira, also the Jairite, was a chief ruler about David. That was a lot. So we have a little time to go through the rest of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at 21, 1 through 14. Somebody would like to read that. Oh, we can do that for now. Yeah, well, thank you. So what happened here is they had a famine, and they said this is not necessarily chronological, so it didn't necessarily happen right after the other thing we just read. But they did have a famine, and David seeks the Lord to see what's happening here, and he calls back to them to let them know that way back when there was an agreement between Joshua and the Gibeonites not to slay them, and that goes back to Joshua 9:15 through 18, and there's a lot of verses in there more than that, but the whole thing of it was whenever the Hebrews came out of the desert and began claiming the promised land, they had already had the victory in 2 different cities, and the Gibeonites were pretty smart. They made it look like they came from a far country, and they basically dressed up in costumes and made it look like they came from a faraway land, and they asked for peace. And so at that time, Joshua said, "Okay, yeah, we'll have peace with you." And then the next day, they showed up in the place where they all lived. so they were basically tricked into a treaty with Joshua, and so they were not conquered as the other cities were. So at that time, the promise was made with Joshua, but Saul did not keep that promise and ended up killing some of the Gibeonites. And so now, it doesn't tell us any obvious reason, but now the Lord is passing judgment on Israel because of this whole thing and putting them into a famine. And so now we see that the way that the Gibeonites are asking for this to be resolved is not payment with silver, gold, crops, whatever it is. That's not what they want. They want their recompense for their people being killed is to kill some of the sons of Saul. And so he lists 5 sons of Michal, the daughter of Saul, but she never had any children, if you remember back from what we read before. And so there's some information about that apparently she raised the 5 sons of her deceased sister, Merab, whose husband was Adriel. And so that's one explanation of it. It may not be the right one, but that was one explanation of it, and why this situation happened. And so we see that after this happens, they're put to death in the days of harvest. And in this verse 10, and Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it for her upon the rock from the beginning of harvest until water dropped upon them out of the heaven, and suffered neither the birds of the air to rest on them by day nor the beasts of the field by night. So she was acting pretty much like a human scarecrow to keep all the animals away from feeding on the dead bodies that were left there. And it was told David in verse 11 what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. And David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, which had stolen them from the street of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them when the Philistines had slain Saul in Gilboa. And he brought up from thence the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son, and they gathered the bones of them that were hanged. And the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son buried they in the country of Benjamin, in Zelah, in the sepulchre of Kish his father. And they performed all that the king commanded, and after that God was entreated for the land. So this was David more or less fixing a problem that had been there for a while under King Saul. God was expecting him to take care of it. So we hadn't heard from the Philistines for a while. So here they are back again, back in verse 15. Moreover, the Philistines had yet war again with Israel. And let's see how much time we have left. We've got a couple minutes. Over? All right. So if you read the verses, you'll see that Goliath's children, brothers, all of that, decide they're going to take on David and David's forces, and they all get killed. So if you boil it down to the bottom line, that's what it says. And there was one of the giants had 6 fingers on both of his hands and 6 toes on each of his feet. I'll leave it to you to figure out if there's an extra little toe, or an extra big toe, or an extra thumb. Whatever it is, we don't really know. Yes, they were. Yes, absolutely. So, okay, there we are. Another 3 chapters. Thank you.